and welcome to our second installment of Voices of Women in Mortgage. We are joined today by the iconic Marianne Sullivan. And preparing for today's session, Marianne asked me a simple question. And the question was, why her? Out of everyone in the world that we could have invited to Women in Mortgage, or at least half the world since it's women, so that cuts out the other half. Why did I pick Marianne to join us? And I hate when Marianne asks me questions like this because they force me to stop and to think and to reflect. And so as I thought about this over the course of the last day, I thought about a couple of stories of my time with Marianne. And I met Marianne when I joined Fannie Mae back in 2006, and I was young and probably a little bit dumb. And Marianne, she was already a force in the industry, and she had built this reputation for this deep expertise in credit risk and mortgage operations, mortgage technology, had done so many things. And when I met her, I remember being intimidated and also a little bit in awe of her at the same time. And over the course of her career, why be in awe of Marianne? Over the course of her career, she has helped shape how we think about risk and housing finance, serving in senior leadership roles, and one of the most notable being the chief risk officer for the single family business at Fannie Mae, which is the largest portfolio in the world of residential homes. And she played a really critical role in guiding that company through one of the most complex periods our industry has ever faced, that being the Great Recession. But Marianne is so much more than the credentials she carries on her resume. And for me, knowing her, I think about different moments in time that we've spent together, and there were a lot of moments. And I remember specifically the weekend when Fannie Mae was taken into conservatorship, and none of us knew what this meant for ourselves, for our families. And I was a young mom, and I was really nervous about what this meant. And Marianne's office became a bit of a revolving door, and she probably could have hung a shingle as a therapist for the many people of Fannie Mae during that time. And I think about just a couple years later, I was given an opportunity that, quite frankly, it terrified me. I was not prepared for it, and that was to lead Fannie Mae's servicing organization and servicing strategies and overseeing the 1,400 servicers that manage Fannie Mae's portfolio in the middle of that really bad, worst housing crisis since the Great Depression moment. And we had borrowed $120 billion from taxpayers, and we had over 1 million homeowners who were in seriously delinquent status and facing foreclosure. It was a really difficult time. And at that moment, Marianne, she was serving as the chief risk officer for single family and had responsibility for leading the organization through uncharted waters. Fannie Mae had to stay in the markets as a reliable source of liquidity to our clients, to the market, to the homeowners, to make sure that the housing markets didn't crash. And I remember a conversation with her. This is another one of those moments that was particularly powerful. And at that moment in time, I was having a little bit of a crisis of confidence, and she asked me who was better to lead than me at that time. And that caused me to stop and think, and I was like, I wouldn't want anyone else to lead but me at that moment in time. And I had to, I think the other thing that she forced me to stop and think about was, what are the things that I would do if I wasn't held back by a fear of failure or timidity, right? And those types of conversations really stuck with me, and have really shaped how I think about leadership and leadership in action, and giving back to others and helping others think about their value and their worth. And what she taught me most is that, again, lead with boldness, especially when there's not a playbook. And she did it all through those moments with thoughtfulness, with clarity, with kindness, with steadiness, and with conviction. So yes, Marianne, that's why I asked you to join us.
Aw.
And I really, really appreciate you. You've shaped how I lead, and it's truly an honor to have you. How's that?
Well, Leslie, thank you. And I don't really know what to say to all that. That was really nice.
Well, so why don't you start with tell people a little bit about yourself and the things that you've done.
Okay. So I went to Georgetown University, actually graduated as an accounting major, and spent the first 5 years of my career in public accounting. It was pre-Enron, and the reason I bring that up is you used to be able to go across the hall when you worked for a client. So Fannie Mae was my biggest client. And so I was 5 years in, and Fannie Mae offered me a job, and I decided to take it. And I was planning to spend 2 years at Fannie Mae, and then I'd go on and do something else. 24 years later, I decided in 2017 to retire. My Fannie Mae journey was really interesting, and probably every 18 months gave me an opportunity to do something new and different. And that's actually how 2 years ended up becoming a full career. Since I left Fannie Mae, I've transitioned to board work. My first board was Finicity, which we sold to MasterCard in 2020. And then I joined the PennyMac REIT board, and I've also served on the board of Sagent, Credit Expert, Ardley, and most recently Envela. I've transitioned and kind of reinvented myself then.
That's cool. So Marianne, looking back, is there a pivotal moment or decision in your career that shaped your leadership journey, and what did that teach you about yourself?
So I think there's probably two, actually there's a gazillion, but probably two that I'd bring up. And you recounted the conversation we had about taking an unknown job, right, and embracing it. I think one of the most pivotal leadership moments came for me it was about 2004, and I was running the real estate owned division at Fannie Mae, and we were doing a system change. And in that process, I realized that we needed to do a restatement. And that was a huge deal. This was well before Fannie Mae's restatement. And everything was always perfect at Fannie Mae. And I really had a screw up. And I called my boss. I told him what had happened. I offered my resignation because I thought surely I should be fired for this having happened on my watch. And he said, absolutely not. You're going to go in and you're going to fix that. And I also got really lucky because probably within that same month, Fannie Mae realized they needed to do a huge restatement for FAS 91, accounting for derivatives, which was the huge Fannie Mae restatement that took 2 years. So my restatement just got, under the rest of the corporate restatement. But the thing that taught me was I was at the absolute bottom, and I had to fix it, right? And I no longer was afraid of failure because I was there, and I understood that, okay, like that's what you do. And so from that moment on, I actually operated in my career. It was kind of funny. I would always be like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? They could fire me, and it was so much more fun to be bold than to be timid and be afraid of failing, right? It was so much more fun to be bold and go out there and forge a path that no one had before. So I'd say that was probably really pivotal. The other moment that was pivotal was when Fannie Mae went when the CEO and CFO got fired from Fannie Mae as a result of that restatement. A guy named Dan Mudd was asked. He had been president, had just been brought in maybe 2 years before. He gets appointed CEO of Fannie Mae. He calls everybody into the auditorium and gives a speech, in essence, a rallying speech. Like, yes, we just had all of our leaders, deposed last night. I'm stepping in. But I remember leaving that auditorium after that hour-long speech. Sign me up. Like, I was so committed. He was so inspirational. And then every single Monday, it's like 8:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, we had a meeting with him. And it was just a rallying cry. Give me that mountain, I'm going to climb it. And so the second thing I'd say is really pivotal is when I learned the importance of being inspirational. and really setting a vision for my teams that we could go after. So those were probably my two most pivotal moments.
Marianne, I love that story, both of them, both the being bold and also that example where sometimes you also need to give leaders a little bit of time to really get to be inspired by them too. And what a great example. So you've had an extensive career in mortgage, and I know you've lived through and seen the trials and tribulations. What type of challenges did you face as a woman in the mortgage industry, and what strategies or systems did you employ as you tried to navigate and move through those in your career?
So I'd say a couple of things. So when I came into the single family business in the early 2000s, to say that when you would walk into a mortgage banking association meeting that it was a sea of navy blue blazers and khaki pants, it's like it was a uniform, right? And there were not many heels in the room, right? It was really intimidating. And so one of the mistakes, and this actually was on me, because I should have been better prepared, is the first time I walked into that sea, I just kept walking. Like, I was so intimidating. I'm like, I don't know how to break into any of these. These guys have known each other. They don't want to talk to me, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that was a barrier for me early on, but it was at least 75% me, and me recognizing that I needed a plan. And my plan was actually I needed a guy, and I used that. I didn't like walking in with another woman was not going to help me. I made a point of like having a guy with me that we could, and I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And so I'd have a plan. I'd, make sure I had some people I was meeting, maybe, so I had some purpose and all that. But so I think the first was just trying to break in. And that didn't apply to Fannie Mae because Fannie Mae was pretty diverse, but it did in the Mortgage Banking Association meetings, which were important for what I was doing. So having a plan. But the other thing that happened to me at one point in my career that I think is a trap that women can fall into, and actually I have a 24-year-old daughter, and I just had a conversation with her about this. But I had a small team, but it was an all-woman team, and we ended up not realizing that there were forces working against us that we just couldn't understand. And I came to realize that it actually wasn't healthy to have all-women teams. And so I made a point, and this was probably, 15 years before I retired, but I realized like, no, I have to make sure that I always have, all kinds of voices on my team. And that includes, men and women. So that was something that, that I think is important. And then the last thing that, you said, or you asked a question about how do I manage that is, there have been some really good organizations for women in the industry that have formed. One in particular, the MBA runs, and I would highly encourage people. So Empower is the one for the MBA. I would highly encourage people to join those organizations. They have great speakers. It's a great networking opportunity. And today I still even meet new people in those settings. So I would highly encourage people to take advantage of those types of opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Marianne, I know that your style has evolved over time too. And, let's talk a little bit about, given how your leadership style has evolved, are there ways that you've intentionally created opportunities for others to lead and to grow over time?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to kind of say as a preface here is that I think it's really important to develop your own leadership style, and everybody has a different style, right? And you want to be authentic, because if you're not, people can see through it in a heartbeat. And I'd imagine if you're inauthentic, you kind of feel inauthentic every day, which probably isn't the best way to show up to work. But for me, what I would say was really important, and they were kind of things that happened early in my career. when I was early in my career at Fannie, I started off in the cubes as like a manager level or something like that. And I remember not being allowed to go to meetings all the time. Like people would block me and be like, well, you're not the right level. You can't attend this meeting. And it had nothing to do with contribution. It just all had to do with title. And I just thought, wow, this is really, really stupid. And if I ever get to the point where I'm in a leadership position, I'm going to care a lot more about contribution, and I'm not going to give a rat's you know what over titles. And so that was probably something that I lived every day. And the way that I would manage in that way is I walked the halls a lot, right? And I stopped by and I talked to people, see what was going on, what were they thinking, and that really created an opportunity for people to have their voices heard and identify kind of opportunities where I'd be like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Like, why don't we do that? And the person could have been, 2 levels below me, but given an opportunity to show what they could do. So I think that was important for creating opportunities, is that experience that I had there. And then the other thing is, and Leslie, we have talked about this before, which you disagree with, which is wrong, but I actually am never the smartest person in the room. I'm really, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at, and I'm honest with myself, right? And so I'm good at synthesizing and bringing people together and collaborating, but I'm never the smartest person in the room. And it's
No, I agree with you on that.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. So it's incredibly empowering as a leader, right? But again, it has to be you and authentic for you, is to tell people that you don't have the answer, but you want them to find it out, right? I'm entrusting in you to do this, right? I don't have a agenda. I don't have an answer. Like, this isn't a game I'm playing, right? I want you to show me what you can do. And I found more often than not, people surprise me in a really, really good way. And so, if I was to give my secrets to my success, it is that I got everything done through other people by believing in them and coaching them and, really becoming a cheerleader. I was also really good at figuring out if stuff was going sideways and stopping it, if it was. But, and clearing the field for the team. Like if they ran into roadblocks, I mean, that was my job. I cleared, roadblocks that were unnecessary roadblocks. But yeah, so in terms of creating opportunities, I think those things create opportunities for people, right? Don't care about your level. I care about your contribution, and I'm going to give you a real chance to show what you can do in, little ways and later big ways.
I love that. And you've touched on some of this, I think, but what advice would you give to women earlier in their career in mortgage today who aspire to leadership positions, and what excites you the most about today and the mortgage industry and the future of women in this industry?
So I think the advice I give to women, and I actually have 3 daughters that are, I have twins that are about to be 22 and a daughter that's 24. So I give them this advice as well, is that women tend to be really good at being doers. And people come totally to rely on them, right? And do more, do more, do more. And this could be home or work, but I'm going to talk about work. But they're not as good at making sure that their voice is heard at the table and that they're seen as a leader, right? And I think that leadership is really a combination of making sure, yeah, you better be good in execution, but also making sure that your voice or your perspective is heard, and that you have an ability to shape what goes on in your team. That it really just struck me, the importance of, like, you can choose to be a doer or you can choose to also be at the table. And I just made a point of making sure in my career that I was respected and brought to the table.
So you talked a little bit about mentors and people who advocated for you in your career and the difference that they made. Is there anyone in particular that comes to mind, Marianne, and how have you used what you learned from them to bring it forward?
So I was really fortunate that I had a guy who his name was Lou Hoyes, or is Lou Hoyes, and he decided, he saw something in me, and he believed in me when I didn't believe in me, right? And he so I got really lucky there. But I then, when I looked back later, I realized what he saw. And so actually, this is one thing I want to say to women, because I was having a conversation yesterday with my old boss, with an old boss. Women tend to look at a job description and it's got 10 different things you need to be able to do. And like, if we don't have 2 of them, we're like, yeah, we're not qualified. A man, on the other hand, looks at those same 10, may have one, and is like, oh yeah, like I'm totally qualified. And so I fell victim to that, of thinking that I wasn't really, because I didn't have everything like the most senior person in that role had. Well, you're not going to have that when you get in, right? So believe in yourself and never, ever, ever tell anyone. And Leslie, you use this in your intro.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that you don't think you're ready. Because if you tell them that, I had an example of somebody who I had worked with at Fannie, who had told someone once that they didn't, in a moment of like frustration, I never want to be an officer. And she was literally taken off the track. And then when she did want to be an officer, they're like, well, we thought you didn't want to be an officer. So there were times that I felt like telling Lou, like, no, I'm not ready. But I was like, what's the chance that I actually do get promoted? And 2, I'll figure it out. And so, so I always did that. But so I was lucky that I had a mentor that believed in me, right? And in terms of paying it forward, is I have a lot of different people that I mentor, and mentoring is different things at different times for different people, right? And some people just need a pep talk, some people need career advice, some people, and it can ebb and flow too. It doesn't have to be like, well, we have a call every Thursday at 2. And I've had people I've mentored where I've had to have a call every Friday at 11, for a period. And I'm like, okay, now I think we're ready to move on from that. So it's just situational in terms of mentoring.
I think so. In some ways, leadership is a lot like parenting, right? You're never. I remember having conversations with my mom, and she finally just said, honey, you're never going to be ready for parenting. You're going to build the experiences over time that you need. You're not going to read it in a book. You're going to learn it by doing and by experiencing. I think that's we've talked a lot about those things. And I do think back to, again, the number of times you probably got sick of seeing me sometimes with like, Marianne, tell me I can do this. So very whiny sounding now. But okay, Sara, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and just one comment, because you said it before, and in that mentor, I think it's important when you mentioned having a multi-gender team, and you mentioned a couple of your mentors have been males. I just wanted to reiterate, I think that is important. I think sometimes women only focus on women being mentors and sponsors, and I think it's important to keep your options open, because we could learn a lot from male leaders as well.
Well, okay, and I want to throw something else out there. Well, one, so my mentees are men and women, right? But the other thing, so when Lou Hoyes left, who was my mentor, he left in 2005, I think. I was like a person without an island, because the person who believed in me left, and I really didn't know if like I could really do the job, or he just thought I could. So first I kind of was like, I'm about to find out, and I then ended up finding out that I actually could do the job, that I didn't need Lou, but I had to find a mentor, and I didn't have anyone. Well, I actually did a reverse mentor. And so there was someone on my team who was just incredible in terms of management. And I spent a year just learning from him, right? I learned things from him, like the time he said, Marianne, bosses are really good at encouraging you to, when someone needs to be fired, like, we have this reduction in force or whatever, but they never like to do it themselves. And it kind of hit me, and I was like, oh yeah, that's one of the things I don't like to do. So maybe rather than when that is necessary, maybe that rather than delegating it, I actually need to do it myself. And, so there'd be times that I did things that took me well out of my comfort zone, but they made me a better manager. Right. And no one likes to talk about having to let people go. So I know that I saw all your faces a little uncomfortable, but one of the things that I mentor people today, and I can tell when people are really uncomfortable giving honest feedback to people, right? And the worst thing that can happen is you have to actually fire someone. But I can also tell when people are hesitant to actually tell people the truth. And what I'll say to that is, as a manager or a leader, if you don't tell someone the unvarnished truth, you're not giving them the opportunity to actually fix it and perform. And I had somebody who we had a new CEO come in and we had to give someone a 0 on our team. And I went through this whole like, oh, I don't have any zeros in my head and stuff. But I actually really did. I just didn't want to admit it. And so I had to sit down across from this guy and tell him he was a 0. And he looked at me and he said, well, that's not how I see myself. But if that's how you see myself, I need to fix it. And the guy went on, he wouldn't make a decision was the issue. And I brought them into my office. He went on 2 years later, he became the single family chief risk officer. And it was because of that conversation we had that day where I told him about his weaknesses. And had I just avoided that conversation, he would have continued to look to somebody else to make the decisions. And he stopped that day. So.
No, thank you. That's a great, yeah. So when you introduced yourself, you talked a lot about your extensive board experience and board work. Try to lighten it up a little bit. Have you ever run into a board situation that had a funny connection to your time at Fannie?
Yeah, I actually did. So when I was on the Penny Mac REIT board, I was chair of the risk committee. And I remember this one time when I don't remember the topic, but I remember the guy who was presenting. I had asked him something about how they were managing the collateral risk, and so he says, "Oh well, we use this tool called Collateral Underwriter," and he goes on to describe what it is, and he goes, "Well, maybe you've heard of it," and he's like going on to answer my question. But everyone in the room just starts kind of chuckling. And at one point, he kind of stops and he looks, and the person next to him goes, she developed Collateral Underwriter. And he just like went white as a ghost. It was kind of funny. But it also, honestly was really validating, right? There's someone who had no idea that I was connected it. So he wasn't, trying to brown nose me clearly. But it does feel good when you kind of get validation that something your team worked on makes a difference in the industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, let's continue the difference making, Marianne. I know Collateral Underwriter is one of many things that you did, but is there something that you think of that's just absolutely central to your legacy?
I think a few things. And part of it, I think I was lucky at the time that I was at Fannie, and it didn't feel lucky being taken into conservatorship. I do have to tell you that, but it was fortunate because it gave us an ability to do certain things that we may not have been able to do outside of it. And one of the things that comes to mind is I know on the servicing side, you had the consent orders after 2008 and then the foreclosure crisis. But I always thought there also should have been consent orders on the front end, and we didn't get them. And one of the reasons was that we quietly worked on improving the quality of the data and information delivered to Fannie Mae, or the quality of the loans. And by doing that, we prevented it. And the one reason I knew that we needed to do this was when we put Collateral Underwriter in, I asked the team to go ahead and run an analysis of our portfolio or recent acquisitions and recalculate loan to value ratio. So we knew that we had the loan amount because I was certain we had cash controls at Fannie Mae, reconciliations on a monthly basis. But I had them compare the value from the appraisals that we got through Collateral Underwriter. And There was a lender that delivered 25,000 loans that they delivered the broker price opinion, which was higher than the actual appraised value on those loans. And when they did that, what they unintentionally did was deliver loans with a loan to value ratio greater than 80% to Fannie Mae. And the reason that that becomes important is that Fannie Mae has a charter that says that they cannot acquire loans with LTVs above 80 unless they have a credit enhancement, or MI is a credit enhancement. And so we all of a sudden figured out that we had 25,000 recent loans that were delivered that were ineligible and that we had to do something fast. And so that was my aha moment, that the data was just so friggin' awful. And so the team wrote SAS code and in essence developed what the delivery edits should be. We couldn't just go ahead and put them in the new delivery system that we were developing, because if we did, lenders would have a lot of loans fail at delivery. And because their intention was to put them in pools, and there were only certain days in the month you could pool, and if you failed delivery, the lender would have to fund that loan for another 30 days, which was really expensive. So we couldn't just like throw edits in and have like the world stop. So we developed these, we made all of the business rules callable, so that delivery called these business rules. And then we developed this tool called Early Check, and Early Check called those same business rules. So lenders could run all of their loans through Early Check before delivery. They could see what was going to fall out, correct it, and therefore they could know that they go into delivery periods with certainty. But it ended up really cleaning up the data for the front end of the business, and that was probably the precursor then to what became day one certainty, because I stopped believing anything anyone delivered to Fannie Mae was accurate, and I wanted to validate it.
So day one certainty, the originator and author of it started right here. It's awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so another fun one. So besides yourself, who are 4 women who would be on the Mount Rushmore of mortgage if one existed?
Okay, so
and knowing Leslie, if you need 5, you can come up with 5, but we'll go with 4.
Okay, so I'm not on it, but I'll tell you who I would put there. So one of the people I would put is Patty Cook. And she worked at Freddie Mac, and she helped shape large-scale funding and structuring of mortgages. So really developing the capital market side that allowed the mortgage industry to grow significantly. I would add Deborah Still, who's the vice chair of Pulte Mortgage. I think she really worked to develop scalable operations, and also develop a leadership pipeline, which I have admired. I would put Marcia Davies from the MBA for that Empower. Empower actually was modeled after something that Digital Risk started, this women leadership conference probably a couple of years earlier, but Marcia was one of the inaugural members of that and recognized the power of having women being able to get together and network. And so she founded Empower. So I for that, I would put her on Mount Rushmore. And then the last person probably is Marianne McGarry, who stepped down a couple of years as the CEO of Guild Mortgage. But I remember working with her in the early days of digitization, and she was just really a pioneer in digitizing and creating better business processes. So those are my 4.
And Marianne Sullivan.
That's right.
Okay.
We got to the 5. All right. Well, so we have a few minutes left, and we're going to do a lightning round of fun, fast questions. So you ready?
Okay.
Okay. So which mortgage term deserves a rebrand the most? Escrow, underwriting, or forbearance?
Forbearance.
What's your go-to career obstacle survival mode? A deep breath, a quick vent to a mentor or friend, or a dramatic walk to go get coffee?
I think it's a deep breath. It might then be a little bit of a walk around the block, and it may even be let me sleep on that.
I like that. Who in your family actually understands what you do for a living?
So I have 4 kids. One is into the sciences, so she really doesn't understand. Well, actually, and then one's an engineer. She doesn't understand. I have one that is in business at Georgetown, and she actually, I think, gets it. Actually, now that I think of it, she's in auditing, and I think she was on the Fannie Mae engagement as an intern last year. So I think she understands housing a little bit. And then my son, I think, is planning to major in real estate in college. So probably commercial side, but I think those two kind of get it more. So, hey, 50-50, pretty good.
That's pretty impressive, actually. And then last but not least, if your mortgage career had a theme song, what's playing when you walk on stage?
So I think it's Don't Stop Me Now by Queen.
Love
Don't
it.
stop me now. Don't stop
Keep
me 'cause
going.
I'm having
You're a good singer, I
time,
know.
having a good time.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh. Well, Marianne, thank you. As a former GSEer, I just have such respect for you and just all that you've helped do to transform our industry and through the times and what you've contributed. And just want to thank you so much for joining us here today and spending the time talking with us and all of the women who will be watching this next week. So thank you.
Well, thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. A chance to go down memory lane. And yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.